Hello, Fiedelbogen here, to my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide. Greetings! In today's talk, I shall enlarge upon the theme of activism versus agitation. There is a difference between these things, you know. However, they are both necessary to the business at hand. Now, I am not personally involved in activism for men's issues, or not much anyway. In fact, I am an agitator and not an activist. And what I enjoy more than anything else is to attack feminism with words. So what I really care about is rhetoric. Others are doing activism, and I salute them. I tip my hat to them. But this is largely a war of rhetoric, and so it is all about scoring rhetorical points. Therefore, my endeavor is to score rhetorical points against feminism. As far as I'm concerned, that's the name of the game, to denounce feminism by the power of words, and to sway hearts and minds accordingly. I refuse to work with feminism, as the feminists would say. That is out of the question, given that I wish to pull apart feminism as a societal construct altogether. I wish to make feminism stop existing, and if I can't do that, I'll settle for doing it as much damage as possible. In that way, I am striking at the root of evil rather than hacking at the branches, and that, to me, sounds like a sensible approach. Very well. A couple of days ago, in a made my day moment, I received the following comments on a certain blog post. Both comments were signed anonymous. Anonymous number 1 said this: "Indeed, feminism started as a war of words. Words were their weapons against us. I remember only too well knowing that their words were lies. Their turgid, dreary books and publications were everywhere. By repetition, women took the feminist message on board unthinkingly. Men were caught in a sea of devil's vomit. The feminists had friends in the mainstream media. They clearly also infiltrated the mainstream media. The BBC is feminist infested, as are most television stations. But who watches TV nowadays? Only the dumbed down and shallow. I watch Russia Today, which has intelligent commentary. Yes, we were verbally outmaneuvered. Verbal karate. A feminist admitted to these tactics, but the trouble for feminism is what was once a persistently challenging ideology, albeit a very dishonest one, now looks a lot older and very boring. We have controversy on our side. We also can shock, provoke, and get a message out that has one big advantage over feminism. It is the truth. So keep the war of words up, Fiedelbogen. The pen, keyboard, is mightier than the sword." And anonymous number 2 said this: "I debated a feminist in real life today. Thanks, Fiedelbogen. I won the debate, and even my little brother backed me up. You are right about the non-feminist revolution." Indeed, I am right about the non-feminist revolution. The only way to overthrow feminism is by a revolution. And if I don't miss my guess, this ought to be the non-feminist kind of revolution, as opposed to the feminist kind. Don't you think so? There are plenty of activists out yonder in the world working to modify anti-male laws, to create men's programs, and so on. The ones that work with feminism are worthless. So I am happy to report that many of them are not working with feminism. Take the SAVE organization, for example. The fact that this fine, upstanding lobbying group was listed as a hate movement alongside of yours truly by the Southern Poverty Law Center is proof positive that they are not working with feminism. If the feminists were pals with SAVE, then rest assured SAVE would not have gotten onto that watch list. But they are on that list, which means that the FBI and other spooks are monitoring them. And this is happening because de facto feminist authority wants it to be happening. As a thought experiment, what do you reckon would happen if Gloria Steinem got on the phone to Morris Dees of the SPLC and said,
Morris, the Save Group and that Fiedelbogen guy are okay. They don't belong on the list.
what do you reckon would happen? So, yes, feminism is the ruling power in the land, and we all know it. And anybody or anything which challenges the feminist narrative in a significant way will go on to their enemies list. That's right, it's all about the narrative. Feminism proposes to make the feminist narrative the official story of reality, and the story of all of our lives. And the non-feminist revolution proposes to attack and undermine the feminist narrative by every possible means, at every point where it infringes on the lives of non-feminist men and women. And how did SAVE attack or undermine the feminist narrative? It did so by challenging the morality of the VAWA legislation and proposing a scrupulously fair-minded alternative. The SAVE people merely wanted to purge ideologically based anti-male bias from the existing VAWA and to pass a new package that would even-handedly help whoever needed help, with no prior assumptions about the sex of the people involved. In other words, a non-sexist, hence non-feminist measure. But if their project succeeded, it would be a torpedo strike midships to the feminist narrative. Indeed it would. Patriarchy theory and all that pertains to it would be politically compromised. And that is why the feminist powers that be have attacked the SAVE group with a vile slander that millions of so-called liberals will sop up uncritically. You know the people I'm talking about, the stooges, the ones who respond dogmatically to certain shibboleths. Useful idiots are called useful for a reason. So when the feminists say that such and such group refuses to work with feminism, what they really mean is that said group, one way or another, poses a threat to the feminist narrative, either through not kissing the flag of feminist rhetoric or through activism that would sap the feminist narrative by implication. Now, in time of war, the only way to work with your enemy is under a flag of truce when you are negotiating as a sovereign power. We non-feminist men and women, as a sovereign power, are mostly willing to work with feminism in this way, but none other. For the only other way to work with feminism is to collaborate with the feminist narrative and effectively become a feminist yourself. And that is precisely what the feminists are demanding. So in the end, it is the feminists who refuse to work with the people other than themselves. That is, they refuse to negotiate with non-feminist men and women. Very well. The enemy will not negotiate, and so the war drags on. And that war, as I have made clear elsewhere, is very much a war of rhetoric, or as my recent commenter called it, a war of words. No, we don't all belong to the activism section of the non-feminist revolution. Some of us, me for example, belong to the agitation section. Both sections are needed. Both sections are vital. But here, listen to the following comment on a blog post from several months ago. This commenter signs himself by the name of Alphabet Soup. I'd go a little further and suggest that the agitator is more avant-garde than the activist. He's the flying bombardier to the activist's infantry. Failure to properly agitate results in a continuing buildup of settled bad ideas that become harder and harder to remove as time goes on. The result is that less and less space is available for new ideas, and the culture stops developing, eventually becoming stagnant and rotten. Agitation is necessary to resuspend settled notions and flush out the muck. I don't think it's possible to change a culture until the settled muck has been shaken loose. We haven't yet reached the bottom layer of feminism or smelled its foulest odors, so, to my mind at least, the agitator's role is of primary importance. Yes, the settled muck of bad ideas within a culture can build to a frightening depth and solidify as hard as rock. And so it becomes as hard as rock to blast it loose again. And the worst of it is that those calcified layers become the only intellectual raw material available to us, the only stuff by which or through which we are able to process reality in the first place. And so the muck of bad ideas defines the limit of what we are able to cognize or imagine. It becomes the proverbial box which we cannot think outside of. In the present case, we must fight our way clear from this sea of devil's vomit called the feminist narrative. We must break free by sheer will and sheer force, and we cannot make use of ideology which the said narrative furnishes, for that would only pull us deeper and deeper into the hermeneutical sinkhole of the narrative itself. In order to reason independently of feminism, we must, reason independently of it. It is precisely that simple. And in order to reason independently, we non-feminist men and women must plant our feet upon our own ground and, having done so, work to enlarge that epistemological standpoint more and more. Now, in order to stand our ground, we must have that ground in the first place. And in order to have that ground, we must claim it. But the initial act of claiming our ground can only be an elemental power gesture, an actus rapiendi, a sovereign usurpation, a pure and simple taking. Happily for us, however, this taking turns out to be a taking back of what was originally thefted from us. Yes, we are quite honorably reclaiming our stolen property. How to do this, you ask? Just do it. That's how. Chiefly, this doing will consist of mustering forces against our enemy, all manner of forces, mostly social, intellectual, and spiritual. But the nature of this is revolutionary, because, after all, that is what revolutions do. They just do it, and they do not bother to seek permission.
Please, sir, may I have permission to overthrow you?
No, thank you very much, but that is not how revolutions roll. Thus, to simplify the discussion, if an aggressor uses arrogant presumption, then all parties to the conflict are likewise licensed to use arrogant presumption. And mark well, this includes arrogant presumption about who is or is not the aggressor. Do you catch my drift? All right, so go forth and agitate. Fight the war of rhetoric and use verbal jujitsu if it suits you. The aggressor has done this for years and does it still. Do you intend to be their punk forever? I didn't think so. Fiedelbogen. Out. To denounce feminism by the power of words, and to sway hearts and minds accordingly. I refuse to work with feminism, as the feminist would say. That is out of the question, given that I wish to pull apart feminism as an agitator and not an activist. And what I enjoy more than anything else is to attack feminism with words. So what I really care about is rhetoric. Others are doing activism, and I salute. There's a difference between these things, you know. However, they are both necessary to the business at hand. Now, I am not personally involved in activism for men's issues, or not much anyway. In fact, I am them. I tip my hat to them. But this is largely a war of rhetoric, and so it is all about scoring rhetorical points. Therefore, my endeavor is to score rhetorical points against feminism. As far as I'm concerned, that's the name of the game. Hello, Fiedelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide, greetings. In today's talk, I shall enlarge upon the theme of activism versus agitation.